Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. As I mentioned before, we're very lucky to have a guest in studio today. Jim Richmond is in studio. So if you don't see him on the screen, it's not because he's slacking off, but he actually came all the way to Mandarin. Right? So good for him. Okay, so we are up to page 218. Just a quick reminder, you probably all saw the message, but there's no class next week. God willing, we will be out of town. So we're very excited about that, but there will be no class next week. God willing, we will resume Wednesday the 4th, I think it is. Wednesday the 5th. Right, Wednesday the 5th. God willing, we will resume Wednesday the 5th. Okay, so we are on page 218. And it's a very interesting question. And the question over here seemed right away, you would say, one second, we know the answer, but it brings up a whole new interesting discussion that we have to think about. So your neighbor tells you about this young new assistant that at his warehouse, right? He's not impressed, right? He complains about the boys' intelligence, work ethics, and mode of dress, right? So clear-cut lashon hara, no questions asked, right? There's no benefit. It's not someone he's asking questions about. It's not like we said yesterday about hiring, this and that. Right now, clear-cut, good old-fashioned, right? Lashon hara. But there's a twist to the story, right? What he doesn't know is that this information is important to you because the same boy has been suggested as a shidduch for your daughter, right? May you keep on listening. Right, so Cindy, the other day when Cindy unfortunately cannot make it today, right? But she sent me a message of of course, most probably not a true story, right? How careful we have to be when we talk, right? About these boys, who cares, right? On a bus in Israel, right? It could be on a bus in America, but it's more common, more likely to happen on a bus in Israel. And they were talking about their friend, right? Let's call Chaya Sprinza, right? And how, this girl is whatever, too chatty, this, that, all over the place. And she just always gets in people's nerves or whatever it is, right? A whole list of, good old fashioned lashon hara gossip, right? How we like to, talk about other people. And as they're terrible thing, right? As they're finishing their conversation, right? The lady behind them taps him on the shoulder and says, well, thank you so much for that information, right? That girl just read or just suggested as a shidduch, right, to my son. So thank you so much for all that information. Right, so the girls get like all flustered. No, that's not what we meant. Whatever, right? And the lady gets off the bus, and they get off the bus early, and they talk to her. She's really a good girl, right? And the lady turns around and said, "It actually wasn't suggested, but it could have been." And you have no idea who's listening, right? So again, I don't know if it's true story or not true story, but the point is, right? That's not the question. That's not the discussion that we have today. But I just wanted to use this opportunity because it is a similar situation. When you say information about someone, you think, well, no one knows who it is, right? I'm just giving over some of my, I just want to, relay over some information. I just want to get some stuff off my chest. Right, and you have no clue, right, that the person that's listening, even if it's lashon hara, even again, if this story doesn't happen, but it makes it a little more real when it is possible. You have no idea who's paying attention. You think you're on a bus and no one's paying attention. You know the person behind you, right? People listen. Come on, let's be all honest, right? We all eavesdrop on other people's conversation, right? When we're on the plane or we're on a bus or whatever, right? We do it, right? It's even if we don't mean to, right? It's just part of, you're at a park or whatever it is. It's part of our natural way of doing things, even unintentionally. When you say something, it doesn't have an effect. That's just a side point. Just I want to bring out from this discussion. But the question over here is, so I want to know what you guys think. It's an interesting discussion. On one hand, the person that's speaking, let's use our thumbs, right? The person that's speaking, right, is speaking lashon hara, right? He has no clue that there's toelis, that there's a benefit, there's any purpose. The person that's listening happens to need the information, right? So there's toelis. So the question is, on the person that's speaking is speaking lashon hara. The question is, if the person that's listening, right, on a typical case, right, if they have no toelas, right? So they have to tell, like we said before, hey, stop or move away from conversation. I don't think I need to know that information. Why don't you go speak to your therapist about this kid? I don't know, right? But you have to stop the conversation because you're also not allowed to listen to lashon hara, as we said. Not only is there a prohibition of speaking lashon hara, but there's also a prohibition of listening to lashon hara. The question over here is, do you have to make the person stop? Because for you, right, as a listener, you're not necessarily getting lashon hara because for you it's a toelas, but for the speaker, right, it is lashon hara. So is that considered lashon hara because at the end of the day, the person that's speaking is speaking toelas for the person that's listening, right? Or no, just because for the person that's listening it's not lashon hara, but the person speaking is still lashon hara because he doesn't know that he's speaking toelas, right? And if it is, you have to make him stop, or it's like, okay, he's a bad person. He's decided to speak lashon hara, but for me, it's not. I'm not getting a veira, right? Because I'm not listening to lashon hara, so I don't have to make him stop. And it's good information that I could hear about this kid, right? So it's a very interesting situation, right? And I'd love to hear what you all have to say about this. Any thoughts? And Jim, please chime in. No, so far no one's talking, so go ahead. Okay, Jim Richmond wants to say something. Go ahead, Jim.
I have to start. Come on.
Go ahead.
Anyway, the question is, should you listen? The answer is no. Lashon hara is lashon hara. Now, I have a question. I have something to add to this, just to further complicate it, because what they said so far was things like he's not impressive. I don't think he's that smart. Those are all so subjective. And so you don't know. And so that's really not helpful at all. What if the person says, not many people know he was in prison for so many years? Does that change the dynamic of if it's okay to listen or not?
Okay, so did you guys hear what Jim said, or you want me to repeat it? Just give me a thumbs up if you heard him. Okay, so just to respond to Jim, right? So first of all, Bonnie, I saw your question. We had a long conversation about toelas, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit over here now because that's really goes to Jim's question, right? So you said right away, the first thing Jim said was that no, you're not allowed to, right? It's lashon hara, it's lashon hara. But we've spoken many times that there are situations where you're allowed to listen. It's not under lashon hara if the toelas, right? If there's a benefit, if there's a purpose. Right. So over here, there is a purpose. You want to know if this boy is right for your daughter. Right. So there is a purpose to hear some information. The question is, which you're bringing up a good point, is this information called toelas? Right. That's a side question. Right. If we're making the assumption that this information is toelas, is beneficial, right? Because someone's opinion, you're right, it is someone's opinion, but typically someone's opinion, right, is formed from he's lazy, right? He's what did he say over here? He's not intelligent, right? I mean, to say you could see, you give him a task to take the papers to the photocopy machine, and he takes the papers to the washing machine, right? I mean, that's not intelligent. Right? Or there's something there that you have to work on, or you tell them to please, work out this math problem in work or whatever it is. There are ways of being able to tell. Now, is that a problem? Not a problem? Okay, right? His work ethics, right? He always comes late, right? He's always coming late. There is ways of metrics of knowing. Now, it is subject to your interpretation to a certain degree, but everything in life is subject to our interpretation to a certain degree. And you, this is your friend, this is your neighbor, this is someone you trust, right? And you want to know what their perception of this person is, right? So we are under the assumption that this will be considered toelas, right? There is beneficial information that I can gain. And as we spoke about before, and just to bring Bonnie up to speed a little bit, right? The ability to speak lashon hara, to listen to lashon hara based off toelas, it comes from two things. Number one, the speaker you're not allowed to stand idle while your friend's blood is being spilled, right? So therefore, if this person is going to get hurt from, this girl's going to get hurt from marriage. Let's say he was in jail for a real crime, not because I heard Toronto now is putting people in jail for not wearing a mask. I'm just kidding, right? But they're if you're talking on the phone while you're driving, they're suspending your license now for 30 days, right? A new thing in Toronto. Now, is that a bad thing, a good thing? I don't know, but you're going to say that, this person's license was suspended. It wasn't for reckless driving. Okay, it is considered reckless driving, but there is, of course, the majority of the time someone is in jail or someone's convicted or someone beats people up, right? So there's extreme toelas, right? And then there's subject. The question is, his work ethics is not up to par. So you have to know what kind of boy does your girl need? Does she need someone that will take control, or on the contrary, she's more the control freak, right? And not in a negative way, but she's more the control one, and she's not necessarily. It's bad for her to have someone that's a little more laid back, right? That will allow her to be more of the controlling of the couple. So again, it's not necessarily bad, but the information is important information to know, right? Regarding. So that's. Speaking Lashon Hara, again, is because of you're not allowed to stand idle while your friend's blood is being spilled. To listen to Lashon Hara, right, for Toelis, which makes it not Lashon Hara, is because, right, you have to protect you. There's a concept of protecting yourself also, right, on a similar note. So the question always is what is considered Toelis? The assumption we are making over here, and Jim, you raise a good point, right? Is this considered toelis or not, right? That's a good question, right? But that's not the discussion today. The discussion today is it is considered toelis, right? It is considered toelis. The question is, we are in a situation where it's toelis for the listener, but the speaker doesn't know that he's speaking toelis, right? He doesn't know that because he doesn't know that this boy was just suggested for this guy's daughter. He's just speaking because he's had a hard day and he slipped today and he's speaking Lashon Hara, right? So the question is, A, do you have to stop him? Are you allowed to continue listening, even though it's telling you, but the speaker is speaking Lashon Hara, right? And if not, that's really the question. Do you have to stop the person from speaking? Any other? Emily, go ahead.
Okay, I didn't look at the answer.
Good.
Even though it's right there. So I think, first of all, like for me, if this was my situation, I just like let's say he's already said certain things. So now I'm realizing what's going on. So based on the things that the person has said so far, for me, I think it has a lot to do with the person who's talking. And like, do I, for me, it depends on who's talking, right? Like who's telling me that information, right? Like whether or not, I know you said you're not allowed to believe Lashon Hara, but it's Toelis, but it's Lashon Hara. For him, it's Toelis for me. But I'm just saying, like, I think there's some degree you have to like evaluate who's telling it to you. Okay. But you know what I mean? Like,
I just want to ask a question on that. What's the difference if it's, the greatest rabbi in the world, right, and happen to have a slip up, or it's, some homeless person or a terrible person that has no, not homeless, because
has no filter.
Has no filter, right? Someone that has no filter. Right now, the scenario, it doesn't make a difference who it is. The guy's still speaking Lashon Hara, right?
But I'm saying,
in this situation, who cares who it is?
So if I was looking into a shidduch for my daughter, right, there's certain people who I just wouldn't, I know that they give you references and all that kind of stuff, but I'm saying like, there's certain people who maybe I just wouldn't ask from them because I don't.
You're right. So that's a question if you're going to trust the person or not. But right now, let's say it's someone that you do, we're talking about someone that your neighbor, someone you do trust. Right? That's it. Someone you do trust. The question is, you have to stop them because they're speaking Lashon Hara, but for you, it's not Lashon Hara. Right?
So I think, like, if there's someone who's Jewish, like, I think if there's
Jewish, not Jewish, who cares? The question.
Well, it does matter if they're not Jewish. It's
right
not
now, the question is we're not saying anything about the character trait of the individual speaking Lashon Hara. The question is a very simple question. We have one person speaking Lashon Hara, not knowing that he's actually not speaking Lashon Hara, but he's actually speaking Lashon Hara because he's had a slip of the moment because he's a good guy, but he had a slip of the moment, or a good gal, and he had a slip of the moment, she had a slip of the moment, and then she's actually speaking and doing a prohibition of Lashon Hara. You, as a listener, happen to be in a situation that's not hearing lashon hara because for you, you know the information, you know that you need to have this information, and you trust the person, and you're willing to listen to the person. The question is, how do we deal with a situation where we have that the listener is speaking lashon hara, but the receiver is not hearing lashon hara? Does the receiver have to tell the listener, "Hey, you are speaking lashon hara, right? But I'm not listening to lashon hara." You can say, "Listen, I'm not listening to lashon hara. I don't have to say anything." Or maybe because the receiver is not listening lashon hara, maybe that's considered now that the listener is not speaking lashon hara, even unintentionally not knowing that.
Okay, so I'm just guessing. Right. So I understand the scenario. I just didn't think I thought if it was someone not Jewish that they don't have a prohibition of lashon hara, but that's a different discussion.
That's a different discussion, yeah.
Right. But I'm saying I think that you have to stop them and say, listen, my child was suggested to go out with this person. So I'm interested in what you have to say, but like, it has to be in the context. You don't have to say, you're speaking lashon hara, but you could say like, it has to be really like applicable for this dating situation.
Okay.
Like I would stop them. I would stop them.
Good. That's what I wanted. Okay. That's your opinion. Suzette, you wanted to say? Opinion. No, good. I'm glad.
Yeah, I'm saying that's what I would do. Cause I think that.
I just wanted to really bring the question out, and
like you've told us like if someone's speaking lashon hara, like it's got to stop, right? So either like
so the question over here is it considered lashon hara because the person's not really speaking lashon hara?
I think so because they're not. It's only toelis. They're only telling it to you in a way that's considered toelis if they know. I'm just guessing if they know that it's for toelis.
Okay. I hear. I'm not disagreeing with you. I hear. Suzette?
Well, my thought is that it is lashon hara and that you should stop the person. My experience as I am one imperfect individual is I can look back in the past 7 days and I'd say I probably have about a 50% track record of doing the right, maybe 25% if I'm to be truly honest. So I think that it is always easier to say, but harder to do it when you get out there. And in one instance where, I thought that's coming out on the stronger end of showing what I'm learning here. Immediately it sort of changes the temperature in the situation. So it's easier said than done, but sometimes it's easier to keep the temperature at a different level, just being, maybe silent or not saying all that, in the context of learning. But I'd say it is, but I know that I have failed the test at least 50% of the time.
We've all failed the test, I promise you, Suzette. All right, we've all failed the test.
Way more than 50.
At different times in our lives, we've all failed the test. So just for regarding this discussion, so you're on Emily's side. It is considered speaking lashon hara, and you have to stop. Okay, anybody else? Any other thoughts? Martha, Bonnie, Marilyn, Sherry, Chayle, any other thoughts? Okay, so the very good. So both Emily and Suzette are on the right track. So the answer is actually, Emily, you spoke it out very nicely the way you said it. It is considered lashon hara. Right? Let's just quickly read through the halakha and we'll expand on it. If the speaker isn't speaking for a constructive purpose, his words are lashon hara, right? Even though the listener has a purpose. And therefore, since what is being spoken is lashon hara, right? Therefore, the listener may not listen, right? So there's two things. Number one, right? The speaker is speaking lashon hara, even though what his words are helping the other individual. But as you pointed out, Emily, and so that the person does not know that. And right now he or she is in a slip moment, right? Let's just call it a slip moment, right? They're in a slip moment, and therefore, right, they are speaking lashon hara. Now that they're speaking lashon hara, right, the person that's listening, even though for them it's beneficial, the words that are coming out, and as we spoke about before on words, are reality, right? Even though We can't see it. We can't touch it, right? But they are a reality. And those words are now going into our ears and into our body, right? And we're hearing it. We are listening to words that have a prohibition of Lashon Hara to them, right? This is a phenomenal insight into how powerful Lashon Hara is. And even though, right, besides the point that, let's say we could say, listen, the person that's speaking is speaking Lashon Hara. I am not having the prohibition of Lashon Hara to listening, but I still have to stop the person because it's not right. He's speaking Lashon Hara, right? We are saying further than that. We're saying the Chafetz Chaim, right, explains that when we are listening, right, even though for us there is a purpose, we're still listening to Lashon Hara and there's a prohibition because the words have an impact. The words have power. And those words, right, have Lashon Hara to them, right? And therefore, right, they are a prohibition. We can't hear it, right? And then we have to stop the person from speaking. Now, as we said, right, we have to stop the person, but we could say, hey, listen, stop for a second, right? Actually, this conversation is important to me, right? Typically, as you said, you could say it in a nice way, right? If it's your neighbor, your friends, that, hey, this is, really probably not the right way of talking, but, happens to be, I need some information, but let me just include you in, my daughter just got suggested for this guy, or my son just got suggested for this girl, right? And if you could sort of narrow your talk and be a little more specific, right? And let's, gear a tone in it, bring it in a little bit, that we don't do prohibition of Lashon Hara, but actually talk about the things that are necessary for me to know, and then we can have this conversation, right? So as you said, you now are making the conversation a toelis. Now the person's included in knowing that you need some information. You are reining it in a little bit, right? That you are actually focused on the information that you need to know, right? But now both parties are sort of in the know, right? That you need that information. But before that, right, you are listening to Lashon Hara. This is so powerful, right? Because let's say it's not a neighbor, maybe it's a conversation on the talk show, whatever it is, or you're in Kiddush and someone's saying something, right? And you happen to eavesdrop, right? Because whatever, we don't eavesdrop, but we happen to eavesdrop, right? And it actually makes a difference for you for that information, right? You're not allowed to eavesdrop because if they're not talking to us, right, you just walk away. Oh, but the information's so important to me. You're still listening to Lashon Hara, right? Because Lashon Hara is when the person that's speaking, the words that are being spoken are in a prohibited, in a Lashon Hara way, prohibited, that words now are prohibited. And even if you hear it for you where you need a purpose for it, that's still called Lashon Hara. That's how powerful Lashon Hara is. And I just want to expand on this for a second, right? The power of words and the impact that they have, right? It's not only words, it's what comes out of our mouth. Songs also, I don't know, I was having a conversation with someone about songs. I don't remember when. With you.
We were talking about last week about reading people's authors, and then you were saying,
oh, right.
It's even worse with music. It was this class.
At least someone's paying attention. Good. I'm glad to hear. Thanks, Emily. Right. You get 3 points for that. Right. But right. So that's the same idea. It's the same concept. We see how far this goes. It's the same idea that the words that the author writes, or the words that the singer, right, or the producer says, and his thoughts are imprinted. And when they go into us, the same way like Lashon Hara, right? It's the words now, these words that you're hearing have a prohibition, they affect you. The power of Lashon Hara, the negative forces of Lashon Hara, the negative spirituality that are in those words, because they are prohibited and they're a Lashon Hara, were said in a Lashon Hara way, even though for you it's okay, they still have an impact on you, and they're still prohibited to listen to because of that impact. And that's the same thing with songs that we hear, right, and things that we read, right? They have an impact on us, even if we don't realize, right? And it just takes a second just to change the narrative. Stop the person. Tell them, listen, hey, let's change the situation. I need information about this, right? I need to know. Now we're all of a sudden we're in the clear, right? Sort of sprinkled a little water. Right? Okay, wrong religion, right? And we're good, right? But that's the power, right? That's the power of Lashon Hara, right? And that's also for us to constantly be aware of, even if it's not a one-on-one conversation, but we happen to hear information, right? We have to be careful. We have to move away from the conversation if that's not being spoken in a Lashon Hara, in a kosher way, even though it might be beneficial for me, but you're not allowed to listen to that information. Go ahead, Emily.
What I was going to say is also, like, if you really want to be, just a thought, it's like, if you really want to be super holy, maybe even tell the person, like, can we talk about it later? Because if they're in a space where they're angry about that person, they may not be able to give us like proper information. You know what I mean? Like if they're angry and they're upset, maybe it's not like a good time to get your toelis from them. And maybe
Excellent point.
Let's talk later.
Excellent point. You're 100% correct. Right. I think over here they're assuming that they're not angry at the person. They're just, it's not even coming out of anger. It's just, a conversation. Oh, we got this new kid worker at our office. And he's like, oh my gosh, he's just so lazy. Whatever he just said. Kids these days, their work ethics is just not the same. We just got someone, the conversation could come up where he's talking about it, right? Not because he's angry at the person. But you're right. If it's coming out of anger or whatever, so then anyway, that's probably not the right person to speak to at any time, because if he already has a negative connotation because of something, right? So it might not be the best person to get information from, because everybody screws up once in their lives. Now, let's be honest, right? Who hasn't, messed up, done a mistake, right? So, it might not necessarily be the right person to speak to, but that is a great point. Even if, let's say there's this one thing happened and therefore that's why he's upset today, he or she is upset today, wait a minute, you're still going to have to stop the conversation, right? You're going to have to stop the conversation. But I think they're assuming over here it's not like that. It's just more of a conversation piece that came up, right? And you're talking about the work ethics of millennials these days. That's a beautiful piece of conversation. I'm sure a lot of us have a lot to say about that, right? But that's not necessarily, once you start talking about individual or a group of people, right? You have to be careful. So over here, it's a way of, it's not coming out of anger. But your point is a very valid point. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so let's there's a beautiful piece over here. I think it's a beautiful way to sort of end this week until we go on a little vacation. And I think it's always something important to know, but especially this next week and a little bit, week and a half, let's call it. Right, we'll be hanging out with our kids or grandkids or nephews or nieces or no one. Right, this is always something important to know, but it's a great time to speak about this now when we'll be hanging out with them a little more. Right, so the influence we have on our kids. Right, so a lemon tree produces sour fruits. A peach tree produces sweet fruits. Right. If parents want their children to be sweet fruits, they have to make sure that the sweetness runs through the fiber of the family tree. This means that they have to keep their observance, conversation, and spirit positive, right? How many times, you speak to teachers, right? My wife's a kindergarten teacher and a first grade teacher, right? You speak to other teachers, and even, sometimes, you hear it in shul, I sometimes deal with youth and things like that, not always, but sometimes, right, and a little more lately than I have in the past, right? But, you want to know what's going on in the house. You want to know how the parents talk, right? A lot of times you could figure it out from the young kids, right? They mimic you, right? Sometimes you hear, how could that kid say such a word? Or how could they, right? Even if it's a sophisticated word or unfortunately a bad word, right? 9 out of 10 times it's because they heard it in the house often, right? 9 out of 10 times because they heard it, or or sometimes talking about the weather, right? What conversations they talk about, kids, right? 9 out of 10 times what they hear in the house. It's just their opinions on different
politics.
I was just going to say politics or sports, or if they're talking about, or they have a conversation about, Israel or what they're passionate about. It's because what they hear that's being passionate about in the house, right? It's what they hear about what's passionate in the house. And that's just a reality. It's a reality. And because there's a rhyme and reason why we call it a family tree, right? The Talmud and Tractate Tainus, which the Daf Yomi finished last week. I'm still finishing it off. I have like 1 or 2 pages left, right? But the Talmud speaks about this story of where this rabbi gives a blessing to his student as he's leaving, and he says you should be like a tree, right? It's like someone that goes. The blessing I give you is someone that's goes by in the fields and he reaches this tree, right? And there's a ravine, and he gets nourishment from the tree, and he gets shade from the tree, and he gets water from the ravine, right? And he says, "Tree, what should I bless you with?" Right? For having good shade, you have good shade, right? For having sweet fruits, you have sweet fruits. For having a ravine, a water ravine right by you, you have a ravine. So how could I bless you? I bless you that your children, means to say your offspring of this tree, right? The seeds that are producing more trees should be like you, right? That your fruits should be many, your shade should be good, and you should always have a ravine by you. Right? And he said to this rabbi, right, he said the same thing with you. What should I bless you with? With Torah, you have Torah, right? With good attributes, you have good attributes, right? So what should I'm going to bless you that your children, right, should be like you, that they should have good attributes and and a lot of Torah, right? And that's my blessing to you. We are compared to trees, right? And the Tu B'Shvat is not that far away. We're going to have a lunch and learn, Mirza Shem, right around, I think it's on Tu B'Shvat actually, right? Or right around Tu B'Shvat, right? January 18th or 14th or whatever, I don't remember, right? Flyer will be out sometime, right? But, right? Tu B'Shvat, we know a man is compared to a tree. We are compared to a tree because a fruit tree in particular, because the fruit tree produces, right, what the tree's like, right? Its offspring is like what it is, right? An apple tree, if you take seeds from an apple tree, you're not going to get a plum, right? Or you're not going to get watermelon, right? Or you're not going to get oranges, right? It's not going to happen, right? If you mix different seeds together, that's a different thing. But from that tree, you're not going to. A tree produces what it produces, right? And we're compared to tree. It's a family tree for a reason, right? It wasn't just made up, a family tree for a reason, right? And that's what it's saying over here. The way we act, the way we talk, right? What is important to us, right? What we show is important to us, right? I enjoy watching a good game, and I do, right? But it's not what my busy conversations always all about. And my kids know that. Okay, it comes up in conversation once in a while, but that's not what I'm passionate about, right? Yes, we're in St. Louis, and I took my kids to a Blues game. Right? Blues is a hockey team, if anybody wants to know. Right? They were playing against the Detroit Red Wings. Right? Which for me was good that the Red Wings lost because they're, with the Maple Leafs, that's always like, a little back and forth. Right? But whatever. Right? I enjoy the game, and I took Batsheva and Miri to the game, and it was great. Right? It was beautiful. It was fun. Right? But that's not important to me. That's not important to me. Right? And they know that. And they know there's nothing wrong with having a good game, but that's not always going to be the topic of conversation. That's not what's going to, our lives and our schedule is not going to revolve around that. I know some people that their schedule revolves around games, right? Their schedule revolves around it. Their schedule revolves around, the latest Marvels. They're standing online for the new Spider-Man. I don't know, right? Who knows, right? And for some people, it's, the stock market. For some people, it's their business. For some people, it's, the latest gossip or the latest fashion or the latest whatever, right? And our kids pick that up. Our kids pick it up. What's important to us, right? How we talk, what's our conversation? Our kids pick that up, right? And if we want our kids, to have better attributes, and we want our kids not to be the gossipers of the class, and we want our kids not to be the ones that are constantly talking in a negative way, we have to make sure that we don't talk that way either. Right? We have to make sure that we hold our tongue, right? And on the contrary, we remind our kids and we talk positive and we say thank you and we say hello and we respond properly to people, right? And it's the same thing with everything else. We make sure we go to synagogue, right? We make sure that we are more strict about our kosher, even if it's a little more out of our comfort zone, right? We make sure that we are, we dress a little more modestly. We make sure that we act in a better way. We make sure we have a mezuzah on our doorpost, right? Whatever the mitzvah is, make sure we light Friday night candles, eat them if we're on vacation, right? Whatever it is, we make sure, right, that what is important to us, right, we know our kids see it and not only hear it from us. For our conversation over here, it's referring to Lashon Hara, referring to gossip, right? And that, I think, is such an important lesson to learn. And especially now we'll be hanging out with our kids. A lot of times parents say, oh, they're in school. They're going to learn in school. They're going to learn in school, right? Let the teachers teach them. Teachers could teach to a certain amount, but the parents, right, have a tremendous impact. And we have to remember that. And let's just end with the quote of the day from Chaim Friedlander, of blessed memory. We convey wrong to our children by a reaction to sin. One who realizes he's handling muktzah acts like he receives an electric shock, not so for Lashon Hara, which is significantly more stringent. So let me just explain what this phrase means to say. The way, basically what we've been talking about, but his phrase is like this, right? The statement is that our reaction to something also shows not only what we're doing, but our reaction to something shows our kids what's important, what's not important. All right, so there's a prohibition on Shabbos to touch things that you're not allowed to use, right? It's called muktzah. All right, so for example, right, you're not allowed to use a drill on Shabbos. It's throwing out, I don't know why a drill came to my head, right? But you're not allowed to use a drill on Shabbos. You're not allowed to use a hammer on Shabbos. You're not allowed to use, glue or a computer or a phone on Shabbos, right? So you're not allowed to use those things on Shabbos, and now it's called muktzah. It means to say that you can't move it or touch it, right? And there's laws, of course, and clauses, and depends where it is, and it's a whole section of the Code of Jewish Law, and we're not going to learn it in 30 seconds now, right? But if someone wants to know more about it, I'll be happy to talk to them about it, right? But that's just for simple, for our conversation, you're not allowed to move it. So let's say you're whatever, you're on the ground, you touch the muktzah. Oh, it's muktzah! Ah! You go crazy. Right? Your reaction's like, oh my gosh, like I'm touching fire, right? Which is good. Okay, it's good. That's true. But how do we react when someone's speaking Lashon Hara? Whatever. Right? Our reaction, that's what he's saying, right? Not so for Lashon Hara, which is significantly more stringent because Lashon Hara is a biblical prohibition, not taking away, God forbid, from muktzah in any way. It's a rabbinic prohibition, and we should look at it as fire, right? But it's a rabbinic prohibition, right? Or anything else, right? If we, by mistake we ate the wrong symbol, right? We ate again. I personally don't know how to eat triangle K. Okay, I'm not getting into kosher, what's good or what's not that good. Right? I personally do not eat triangle K kosher certificate. Right? I eat star K, of course, but not triangle K. All right. So let's say I by mistake ate something that triangle K has. Go, oh my gosh, it was triangle. Yeah, a reaction is good. Right? Our kids should know that it's something that's strict. Life's not always a mistake. I didn't realize, whatever, right? But the reaction we have, right? The same way, if by mistake, you deleted something on your computer. Say, oh my gosh, I deleted it. What a good tool, my business, right? Right. So our reaction, right, shows what's really important to us, right? To both us and, of course, to our children. So how do we react if by mistake we heard Lashon Hara? How do we react if by mistake spoke Lashon Hara, or unfortunately on purpose? How do we react? How do we react? That's the question, right? And again, both ideas are on similar things that we have a tremendous influence on our kids, right? We have a tremendous influence on our kids. And as we're going into what we call winter break here in Torah Academy, right? And other schools around the country, right? As we're going to spend more time with our kids, wherever you may be, if it's here in Jacksonville or away, right? Remember that what you do, how you react also to something, right? What you show is important. What comes out of your mouth, your kids pick up. They pick it up, and you have a tremendous influence on them. So let's try to do things positive. Let's try to show them that what's important is positive behavior, speaking nicely, not listening to Lashon Hara, caring about people, caring about our Judaism, caring about our mitzvahs, caring about our relationship with our Father in heaven. We could have fun. We could go on roller coasters. We can enjoy a good game. There's nothing wrong. That's secondary to our relationship with God. Right? That's not the important parts of life. What's important is our relationship to our Father in heaven, right? Connecting to our Judaism, right? And making sure that we're kind and respectful to other people. Wishing everyone a beautiful day, a good week, and an enjoyable winter break. And I hope to see you all on Shabbat.